Steve's got to start the recording first.
Okay, the recording has started, and I saw Simon also come in.
Present.
Okay. Okay, then it's 12:01 on this Wednesday afternoon, October 6th, and I'll call the meeting to order. And Diane, would you start with a roll call, please?
All right, there's a pretty god-awful connection.
We need to get people to mute.
If the non-commissioners can mute right now, that would be helpful. Thank you. All right, Dan.
Roll call. Commissioner Croom,
Present.
Lowski,
Present.
Commissioner Olszewski,
Present.
Commissioner Mackey,
Present.
Commissioner McLeod,
Present.
Commissioner Mailer,
Present.
Commissioner Thompson,
Present.
Commissioner Ward,
Aye.
Commissioner Wong.
Present.
Full house.
Full house.
Excellent. And then self-introductions by those who are either sitting in the conference room or online.
Well, I'll start. Jim Jager from the port, and Diane is sitting next to me.
And Steve Rebuffo from the port.
Val Dreyfus from Matson.
Dylan Faber with Matson.
Alex Holford with Coat. Tony Davenport with Matson.
Jeff Clopton with Matson.
Jeff Bull, Jacobs.
Kurt Mattingly, Menzies.
Carl Hill and Alexander Salmon from Igiugig Village.
Hadley Owen with NOAA Coast Survey.
Dave Blessing from Parish Blessing.
Jeff Percy with Parish Blessing.
Tom Reuter, Alaska Maritime.
Brittany Kennington, Alaska Maritime.
And Luke Hasenbeek from Alaska Maritime.
Okay, here in the port conference room is Sharon Walsh, Shannon Martindale, and I'd like to introduce our new port engineer manager, Brian Wagon.
Right here. Whoa. Oh, looks like we may be off. They can't see us.
All right.
Is there anybody else online?
Yeah.
Shelley Beckham from the port.
Colby Hickle with the Muni.
Chris Vernon, North Star Terminal.
Pat Duffy, Petrostar.
Casey Sullivan, Marathon.
Well, welcome everybody. This is quite a broad crowd we have today, and that's exciting with the subjects we're dealing with. Paul, if he's available, or somebody for a safety moment, please.
I don't believe Paul was on the line.
Well, he told me that he was going to be here for this. So we can come back to the safety moment, or we can create one. So let me go ahead and create one. We are fast approaching that time of year where the weather changes from what was an Alaska summer to a abbreviated Alaska fall, and soon to be winter. And so it's time to shift our mindset from the summer driving mentality into the winter driving mentality. It's getting darker earlier. It's staying darker later. And for some reason, we tend to have to relearn, how to behave when we get into our driving habits in this kind of weather. And remember that I think we're in the season for snow tires. For anybody who puts studded snow tires on their car, now's the time to get ahead of that before you're racing the clock and racing the snow. So have a very safe driving winter, everyone.
Steve, thank you. Approval of the agenda as presented. Is there any motion to approve?
Motion to approve from Garrett.
Second by Paul.
Second.
And Mr. Chair, may I make a recommendation before we approve the agenda to change the order of the day for the informational items?
That was my next question. Any changes? And there's a request from the port director to change the order of informational items. Any objections?
Yeah, thank you. I would like to I'd like to change the batting order for the staff reports and let Jim Jager go first. We've got and I'm sure he'll talk about it, but we've got some visitors coming down for a boat tour that may put him in a position where if he doesn't go sooner, he may not be here for the later part of it. And so we don't miss his report. I'd like to let him go first. Everything else can stay in the order that they're in. Thank you.
Any objections? Hearing none.
No.
All in favor of the agenda as changed for Jim Jager, item E under informational items to precede item A?
Aye.
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 Okay, agenda is approved. We will look at the July 28th meeting minutes. Are there any changes to the meeting minutes?
This is Brad. The only thing
Is
I
there a
saw
motion to-
was a.
Can we get a move to approve first, please?
That's where I was going back to. Thank you, Steve. Could I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve, Brad. The minutes.
Okay.
as proposed.
Who was the second? Did I hear a second?
Second, Leshetsky.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, any changes to the meeting minutes?
Yeah, Brad here. Under just some grammaticals under line item 6, item C, towards the bottom. North extension and maturing the cargo. I think that's supposed to be dock design. And
I don't follow where you are, Brad. I'm sorry. Item 6, Charlie.
6 Charlie towards the bottom.
Okay.
You see the misspelling there? Cargo dock is misspelled.
It certainly is.
And then a little farther down, aware is the letters are displaced there. WAWRE instead of aware. Those are the only changes I saw.
Okay, I can't find the second one, but I will go in search of it.
Lastly, the commission was made aware of a pending meeting. One
Is that
the misspelling?
Have you moved on from item 6C for that?
Nope. It's just one sentence below the cargo dock misspelling.
We've got it.
Okay, I found it. Yep, I got
Okay.
it. Thank you.
Is there any other changes?
That's all I had.
Other changes or additions? Hearing none, motion to approve the agenda. We've got the motion, approval of the agenda. Do I hear any objections? Sorry, approval of the minutes. I'm sorry, do I hear any objection? Jet lag is catching. Hearing none, the minutes are approved. We'll move into report director's comments.
Okay, well, I have two, but now I only have 1.5 because Sharon stole my thunder. Apparently, I wanted to introduce our new port engineering manager, Brian Wagand, who I believe is in the conference room with some of the staff who are sitting in there. Brian is a long-awaited backfill, as you all know. We've been talking about how anxious we've been to fill that engineering position for a very long time. So we're certainly happy to have him on board. No one happier than Sharon, which is why she stole my thunder. She's got somebody now to help share the engineering load around here. So Brian, welcome aboard, and you guys will, I'm sure, hear a little bit more from him as we get into the informational items from the port staff. And the only other thing I wanted to mention, and I'm only going to do it because some of the key players are in on this call, but I have asked the managing board of the Cook Inlet Harbor Safety Committee if I could step down from the chairman's position on that board. I kind of held it from the beginning. Part of it was, and I'm sure Commissioner Ron Ward can back this up. Part of it was, we wanted to stand this thing up as soon as possible, and I was a convenient candidate, so to take that position on, and happy to do it on behalf of standing up a rather worthwhile organization here in Cook Inlet. But my time is pretty pressed right now. And it's also time to get somebody involved who has more of a day-to-day, hands-on dealing with safety-related issues in Cook Inlet. I worry a lot about the port, but I don't worry a lot about much of anything else. So I sort of volunteered a name, and this individual anxiously accepted. So Commissioner Paul Mailer was inducted as the new chair of the Cook Inlet Harbor Safety Committee, and we're going to have a little handoff ceremony when this meeting's over that none of you are invited to, but Paul and I will sit down and do a little bit of transition, but I think the committee is in excellent hands, and congratulations, I think, Paul.
Thank you, Steve. I'm looking forward to that next challenge. The pool is pretty lean here, so we're all kind of working the same issue. So thanks for your work on the Harbor Safety Committee. Much appreciated your leadership and stepping up, and looking forward to the next challenge. Thank you.
All right. So with that, Mr. Chair, I will. I have no further remarks. We've got a lot that the staff would like to report on, so I suggest we get right into that.
Sounds good. Well, first, thank you to Paul for taking on the Harbor Safety Committee. His background is so appropriate for that. Moving on to informational items. Jim, would you like to start, please?
Absolutely. I'm going to keep this very brief. So things I've been working on, we have a number of things we're working on or continuing to work on some grant applications, trying to get money from, right now it's federal granting organizations for various port projects that are going on, and that includes some PAMP related projects and then some ongoing port construction projects. The lead contenders right now include the trailer on flat car loading facility that at some point in the next few years we want to be able to be loading trains more efficiently at the port. We're also working on fundraising for our port emergency road. We want to replace our current emergency access road to one that actually gives us better availability. The current road is very close to the front gate, and there are a lot of opportunities for both the emergency access road and the front gate road to be closed. So we're trying to have a true secondary road. We are continuing to work on the port power plan. Go ahead. Was there a question? Okay, we're continuing to work on the port power plan. We're working with the Department of Energy and Joint Base Elmendorf Richardson and Chugach officials on that. That it's basically going to be our emergency power backup. We have a near-term problem in that we've had several power outages this summer that have occurred during ship offloading operations. We are working with Chugach to resolve the near-term problem. We met with them yesterday. We're meeting with them again next week. The solution is probably going to involve some new switches being installed in our power distribution system down here at the port. And we're working to make sure that the short-term fixes align with our long-term fixes so that we're not going to be spending money twice. And several port users will be asked to join the meeting next week. We're working with former Senator Begich's office on a federal lobbying effort in order to figure out how we can get money and what money we can get for the port modernization program out of the soon to be passed, we hope, federal transportation bill or infrastructure bill. We're continuing our state fundraising efforts. I've been meeting with various legislators, mostly with Teams meetings recently, to brief them about our project. I'm leaving this meeting early today so that we can go under the dock for our last dock tour of the season with a number of Mat-Su borough political leaders, mayors of both boroughs and some other aides. And then, as I said, that's going to wrap up our tour season for this year. And that's really, that's the bulk of what I've been working on recently.
Thank you, Jim. Is there any questions for Jim? Hearing none, well, thanks for all the tours under the dock so they can appreciate. As Ron says, what an eggshell we are sitting with serving Alaska's communities.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, please.
Yeah, before we move on, I just want to recognize for the record that Mr. Eugene Haberman showed up during Jim's presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Steve. Welcome, Eugene. Brian, would you start by giving us a little background on yourself and then discuss the engineering?
Actually, I think Shannon's next, but we can change it if you like.
Thank you. I overskipped. Shannon, would you start and then we'll go on? And thank you for correcting.
No problem. Thank you, sir. Operations and maintenance is going well. We had a great summer and working on a lot of preventative things. For maintenance, we're prepared for winter. Our equipment is winterized and ready to go. We've received the sand and ready for winter. Working on currently some overgrown trees along Terminal Road back by the railroad tracks, and also assisting our new engineer manager with projects as needed. The Ship Creek boat launch, we are going to be pulling the remaining floats tomorrow at high tide, and the restrooms will close and lock up for the season October 15th. The North Float, as Jim mentioned, the season's coming to an end, and early next week we will be using North Star Services to get the float removed. Operationally, things have been going ongoing through the summer with users, Manson, PAMP. Everyone thankfully has been working together as diligently as possible, and I greatly, as well as the port, greatly appreciates everyone's communication and working together. It's not a small task to ask of anybody. Everybody's schedule's fluid and changing, as well as weather and tides and things. So it's always a moving target, and we seem to close it out successfully every week. So hopefully we can keep that track going through construction ending for this season. Manson is set to wrap up October 31st and with the sail out date of November 1st. And Matson, I thank you for being very accommodating on the land side of the yard through the summer as well. Been very helpful. As far as port call is concerned, we do have 2 Korean Navy vessels expected to arrive at the beginning of November. One's going to be a destroyer and the other one is an oiler. We have our last cement vessel coming in next week to close out their year. And outside of that, nothing out of the ordinary for port calls to close the year out. That is my updates. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Shannon? Shannon, I had one. I know earlier in the year there was a issue with a naval ship and a load. Did that impact the operations of the port at all?
A naval ship and a load?
I think he means deployment.
Are you referring to a deployment that took place?
Yes.
No issues with that. That was successful.
Thank you. Any further questions for Shannon? Okay, then I'll restart where I missed in the first place. Brian, if you would introduce yourself and give a little background to the commission, please, and then the subject.
Sure, I know it's exciting to pick on the new guy. That's why you wanted me to go first, I bet. But I'm Brian Wagon. I came over from project management and engineering. So I did a transfer over to here where I did a lot of just horizontal work, not a lot of vertical work. So I'm letting Sharon take the lead on most of that stuff because she's an expert with the vertical stuff. So, but currently I'm working on the stormwater plan here. It seems like it needs a lot of work. There are a lot of heat trace systems, make things, heat up in the wintertime. There's a lot of environmental problems down here, so I'm looking into the environmental plans. There's 2 Korean ships, so I've been tasked with looking at the structural integrity of the port to make sure that those 2 can stay abreast together and dock. I had a fun time reading the wharf condition plan. That was a lot of fun. A lot of new terms I learned in there. So getting really caught up on speed there. We just finished up trestle 3A for the repair for because Tote drives over that. So we finished that up and we just did a temporary fix. We just put about 2 inches of asphalt over there and we are going to finish up and bid the project next summer. So it's a lot on my plate, but it's super fun and exciting. I get to walk the port every day, which is amazing. Great views. I highly encourage everybody to come down and walk the port at least once. So if you guys haven't done it yet. So.
Thank you. Is your background in civil engineering or as a professional engineer or?
So I have my master's in civil engineering and I do have my professional engineering stamp. So I'm a registered professional engineer here in the state of Alaska.
Thank you. Questions for Brian, please.
Yeah, Brian, this is Paul Mailer. You said, first off, welcome. It's great to have you on the team. Great background. I'm looking forward to working with you. You mentioned, you said a lot of environmental issues. Anything that the commissioners need to know of? Anything, is that just a broad statement that there's a lot of environmental concerns, or are there specific issues that we need to know of?
Oh, nothing yet. Just the same old, cathodic protection, and they're doing tests on the water system here. So Michael Baker's out just doing their normal stuff. So nothing major that we need to bring up right now. But if there was, I would let Steve get a hold of the commission and let you guys know.
Great, thank you, and welcome aboard.
Further questions, please?
Yes, this is Ron. Brian, just further to, that was my question, but you sort of touched on it. This has come up several different times in the last couple of years with respect to reports on the condition of the docks. And I don't often get a real concrete answer. It's often, well, it was before my time, but I'm interested in what the current condition of the cathodic protection system is and what the plan, what are our plans to get it going again?
So twofold. We are doing an anode project next year. So we are waiting on the submittals from Kaufman Engineering. So we are doing another cathodic protection upgrade to
POL2.
To POL2 for Sharon's project, but she would know a lot more about the cathodic protection system right now. I'm just reviewing the plans and having a field day with those because I love to learn and I'm a nerd, right? I'm an engineer, so we like to look at that stuff.
So helping out Brian here. He's been here since right after Labor Day, so he's been really drinking from the fire hose. In terms of the cathodic protection system on the main dock, I think everybody's known and heard before that it really is very ineffective. It's pretty much worn out. But on the other new news for you guys is we did receive the work assessment for Michael Baker, which is the contract that Brian's managing. And we got the draft report. We we've had some review questions, went through it with Jacobs Engineering as well, and they are responding to our questions. And then they're going to go through and do a sweep of that, and then that'll be ready to. I don't know that we'll issue it. So some of it's kind of sensitive security, but in general, we'll be able to report on that. The bottom line is that we have, they evaluated the wharf for the integrity, for if it was its original design criteria and how that and if they were all healthy piling, how did it stand up? And actually found that for the older parts, like Terminal 1, even under the original design criteria, some of the members are overstressed. Then they just did everything for updated design criteria. What if we had today's dock, all healthy piling, but we applied today's design criteria, current codes to it? How does it stand up? We stand up okay in general for still relatively okay if they were all healthy for gravity loads, but most of the dock is overstressed for lateral loads. So a seismic event or ship strike. And then taking those two base pieces of data, they applied the inspection report that we did last year showing where we knew we had weak piling or which piling were weakest and all of that. They applied that and determined that they are recommending that we lower the published allowable deck loads by about 75% on terminals 1 and 2, and not by 75%, but to 75% of original on terminals 1 and 2, and to 80% of original on terminal 3, especially during the winter when there's extra ice on that piling that's also stressing the dock. So, and that sounds, we're derating the dock, and yes, that's true, but in reality, for example, and Alex jump in here, but our allowable dock loads, even with the reduction, are still much higher than, for example, what Tote has on their deck loads on the ship. So we're going to, when they do go through and clean up the review comments we had, we'll formalize that. Like, we don't at this point expect it's going to affect the operations. And for Val and Alex, by the way, just this morning we had a conversation about it with Michael Baker about the wheel loads. So the wheel loads don't really govern. So they don't really see that the wheel loads are driving a problem. So for now, we're okay. We just can't be storing a lot of heavy stuff on the dock, which we don't. So that's good information. The second phase now that they have all that model calculated and all those things is to take the corrosion rates that we estimated for the PCT, apply those to the model that we have, and you've all heard us call it the doomsday clock, but predict at what point we need to reduce. We should expect to have to reduce allowable deck loads further. So that's coming along. Bottom line is we're okay for our usual operations, but we have a much better sense of the numbers and what we need to be watching for, you know, future monitoring. Did that help?
Somewhat.
Yes.
Thank
Any
you,
questions
Sharon.
for Sharon or Brian?
Well, just as a follow-up, you stated that you weren't sure when the report was finalized, whether it would be released. I would assume that that would come to the commission, if at least, maybe not to the public, but we would like to see that, I think.
Yeah, well, it's sensitive security information because basically it shows you where the weak spots on the dock are. But yes, we'll figure out a way to do a presentation, whether we can do it back here in the conference room or something like that. But yes, definitely, we'll relay that forward, or we'll do call it a sanitized version of it. But yeah, we have to be careful about publishing that kind of stuff on the interweb and everything else because we just don't like to show people where we're rickety.
And I didn't hear anything about POL2, Sharon.
Well, you know, POL2 was not part of this assignment to Michael Baker. It's got its jackets this year. We should mention that the jacketing program for 2020, the additional items that were finished last year were finished, I think, this week. So we have jacketed all the split piling, and it's going to hang in there for a bit longer. And then with the anode sled work that's awarded, it just is too late in the season to do it now. That work will, that's one place where cathodic protection is making a difference and will continue to, next year when we have those new anode sleds in, that'll help keep POL2 in the best condition it can be in. And just so people know, one of those anode sleds is being paid for by FEMA, which is a good thing because they're pricey.
Oh, good. Okay.
How many piling was at risk on POL2, Sharon? Was it Brad?
Yeah, you would ask that, wouldn't you? Off the top of our heads. I think it was about 20% of them. Just about, Jim, help me out here. What's that number we've been using? Oh, Jim must be.
We have 1,400 under the dock in general.
POL2.
Yeah,
POL2.
I don't off the top of my head what the POL2 number is.
Yeah.
But I believe we have been saying, as a consequence of the earthquake, you know, the 20% were in of immediate attention.
And they were repaired, and FEMA paid for that, which is nice.
Correct.
I just remember it was three or something like that at POL2. That's why I was just wondering. It wasn't a whole lot over there.
This year it wasn't a lot. It was 20% of the piles we lost during the earthquake.
Yeah, I was just
main deck.
right. I'm just meaning at POL2.
So I can get that number for you guys. See what was done this year.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Thank you.
What do you want? How many piles?
Thanks, Sharon.
Any further questions for Sharon or Brian before we move into Sharon? Well, Brian, welcome aboard, and we look forward to you expanding your vertical knowledge in addition to your horizontal engineering and the guidance that working as a team to keep the port so functional as we need as Sharon pursues the modernization, which Sharon, you're up.
Okay, thanks. Well, you know me, I love to show fancy pictures, so hopefully.
Share the meeting itself.
I think I showed the screen, so everything should be on there. You guys seeing, are you seeing some pictures?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Okay. So this is just some general stuff that's going on. This is actually the new South Float dock, which was added to the PPM's contract so we could get it done a little more efficiently. Unfortunately, the belugas got really hampered our progress in September. And so we, since South Floating Dock isn't going to really be put in use till next year, we deferred the piling installation till the spring. but they'll do that first thing next year. But meanwhile, the dock itself, the new floats, this is it. This is what it looks like. It's all put together. It's been towed over and stored in the place where the old South Floating Dock used to be stored off of the small boat launch. So just to show you, it's real. It's there, and we're happy about that. Next picture, these are just some, extracting the template piles. That was another thing we were kind of sweating. We didn't know if we'd have to leave some of those in till next year, but Belugas gave us a couple days respite, and we were able to get all of the template piles out. So you don't see any of these skinny ones anymore. And then also we, the same time this year, we were able to cut off the extra piling that were under the dock from last year. We cut those off because that can be a hazard to work boats or whatever if they have to be under the dock. So those are cut off in the mud line. So that's going on. This is our new hose tower. These are the causeways heading out over the big dolphins. It's pretty exciting. And another photo for you. Wait for it. There it is. That's the new operations building. So the water side is on this side. This is facing the water. That's the new hose tower. I got another shot of that to show you in a second. And this is the new operations building. So there's not a lot going on downstairs, but upstairs is where all the magic happens. And it's actually starting to look like a real building. Then over here, I have a photo that I took last Friday. Make it a little smaller if I can. Stand by 1 sec. Sharon. You have to catch the corner. Do it. There we go. Oh, it's much bigger. Okay, hold on. Well, we'll call it extreme close-up day. How about that? So this is the hose tower, and I included this in here because I wanted to show you. This is a hybrid hose tower. And these are the articulated, this is the arm part of it, the stiff part of it, and they'll swivel, and then the hoses will be hooked to the other ends of them, which you can't quite see from this view. But they're installed. The winches are up here on the top, and they'll be, manipulating all of that. So it's pretty interesting. Moving on. This is another good shot of the causeway. Those guys are putting electrical stuff, whatnot on, which is kind of interesting. And so all the causeways are in place with the temple piles out of the way. All the causeways can be, or the walkways, catwalks, that's what I'm trying to say. All the catwalks have been able to be permanently anchored. And then this is the piping, the actual fuel piping. So you can see this is the above ground part. Just out of this picture, it dives underground, goes along South Transit, and then comes up above ground right at the Povey, and that's what they're finishing up right now. These are the 6 lines. And then the cement line is yet to be done. ABI is going to do that next year. I don't know if anybody from ABI is on the call, but they can tell you about that at a future date. And so this is an interesting thing where you see these 2 roofs right here, these hatches. Underneath there are the expansion joints. They're big elbows that are made to flex in case of a seismic situation. But they also, if they should fail, they're also kind of designed like your car is to fail in the extreme situation. And then we have spares, 6 spares, or 12 spares, or there's 6 here and 6 down here. That's part of the being able to repair this thing within 7 days of a catastrophic event. And so it would be designed to fail right here. We put in our new spare parts that we have here on port now, and we can get back in business right away. So that's kind of an interesting shot there. And that's taken from the top of the hose tower, which is one of the best views in town now. I think that's all I've got on pictures. Any questions on that before I stop sharing?
Any questions for Sharon?
Sharon, this is Paul. Do you have more on the modernization or just questions on the pictures?
Yeah, no, I have more to report, but
okay.
And also I really want to say that the in terms of production and so on, our biggest concern right now, I guess everybody's noticed it's an early winter, when I go up to one of these other photos, but I don't think it's in there, is to get the breasting dolphins, get the fenders on. That's the old POL 2. I'm gonna take these down because they're kind of a distraction right now. Just a second. Stop sharing. Okay. So there we go. So our biggest concern is getting the fenders on the platform and the breasting dolphins. We have 4 fenders on the Petroleum Cement Terminal platform, and then we have 3 breasting dolphins that need fenders. And we're feeling quite comfortable now that the loading platform itself will be able to finish that. We have all 4 assemblies are hung up there right now, and we have 3 of them are more or less complete. The 4th fender, the northernmost one, we've been waiting for a low tide cycle so they could finish the attachments at the bottom. But we're confident now that we're going to get the loading platform fenders on. Where it's significant, especially to folks like Captain Mailer, is if the breasting fenders. The rubber for those arrives next Monday. And we got the rubber in 2 shipments. That was the big delay. It was an American-made issue that delayed it. PPM is going to do everything they can to get those things installed. They're going to start with the northernmost one, and then if they can, weather permitting, they'll try to get the breasting dolphins, the fenders on breasting dolphins 2 and 1. Those are the southern side. If we cannot get that done, we will still be able to open the platform to accept the shorter vessels. So barge tug combinations, fuel barge and tug combinations. You can see that the upland work is going well. The piping is, we do expect to get all the upland work done. So we can put the platform into operation essentially on schedule near the end of December. That's our current plan. If they're able to get the breasting dolphins on, then we'll also be able to accept tankers over the winter. If not, then we'll have to, tankers will still have POL1 and POL2 to use, but we won't be able to time up to PCT till next spring. So that's, PPM is doing everything they can starting October 11th and tides and weather permitting to go ahead and finish that up, but just heads up to everybody. It may be a soft opening or a partial acceptance. Other than that, as I said, we'll have the South Floating Dock piling driven next spring. If there's some miracle happened and it really warmed up and everything was magical, there's an outside chance they could install that piling this year, but it's really the kind of thing where we don't want to push it. The big thing that everyone needs to remember, and most of you mariners on the call will know, is they got to get that big crane and their other equipment back across the Gulf before conditions make it very difficult to get back across the Gulf. So, it's a race against Mother Nature right now. The other things that are going on any questions on that before I talk about going forward, future parts of the program?
Yes, Sharon, it's Paul Mailer. Thanks for that. You kind of hit on what my questions were going to be. Ultimately, what I'm understanding is there's a delay in opening up fully the PCT. That's what we're talking about, more than likely. So we may, if things go well, I'm just paraphrasing, making sure I have it right. If things go well, we may be able to do a soft open and be able to work barges. But looking more than likely, tanker operation will be delayed until next spring. Is that correct?
I'm an eternal optimist. I'm going to say more than likely. I'm saying there's a potential for a delay in completing those fenders. It's a little bit, the contractor is, how Scotty was on the bridge of the Enterprise saying, I don't know that I can do it, Captain. But then he always gets it done. So we kind of have that, coming from the contractor, and we're still hopeful that they'll be able to work it. But there are a lot of factors playing into that, and so we have to be realistic. It's possible that we won't get that.
Question right now, but I would ask I'm sorry, Shannon, if there is a delay, obviously that's going to impact the cost of the project to restart and finish in the spring. And I'd be interested, to hear what that would be when we realize what that change of cost will be to the project for that delay. And I guess, you spoke of the belugas. Is that why the delay ultimately we're facing? Because the last Port Commission meeting, we were almost ahead of schedule and we were doing really well. And now we are not going to make it. So in a very short period of time, we had a big change. And I just would like an update on what exactly, in your opinion, caused that significant delta there. Thank you.
Well, I think you did hit on a big piece of it. We had significant beluga activity in September. They had far less days to work than they did, say, a year ago in September. In fact, I've asked the project team to give me a comparison. And part of the reason for that is because halfway through the project, the marine fisheries people were acting on some, their interpretation of some data, and they threw out our actual measurements and said, no, we think it better be this. And halfway through the project, they expanded the zones, exclusion zones, expanded the zones in which if there were belugas there, we couldn't work. And so I've asked them to do a comparison for me of where were the zones last year regarding versus production days, and the zones this year versus production days. So we're looking into that because we need to have that in our back pocket going forward and say, look, it gets to a point where arbitrary revisions by the regulatory agency is not helpful. And we're fine with decisions that are based on hard data, but a problem for us, and this is partly my personal bias, I'll say that right now, is arbitrary decision. We just don't like that number, so we're going to say this number to be safe. And that is a problem, but we're working it. So yes, that's a big piece of it. The second piece of it is we had some material delays. As anyone who's reading the papers today knows, supply chain is completely messed up. So material delivery has been another piece of that. And that's really the basics. I would say that the contractor, they don't want to be here longer than they have to. They don't want to come back next year. But facts being what they are, nature being what it is, early cold weather. We just have to do the best we can with all the factors within which we have to work. Regarding cost, we have a change management team that we talk weekly about it. Yes, the contractors, put forward that they believe they're due some extra costs for some of these issues. And like any complicated project, these things are going to come up. And it always comes down to entitlement and then quantifying. Entitlement, are they really due to it, or is their contract, require them to bear the costs? Those are the first thing we look at. And of course, in this COVID time and material delay time, that's getting to be a sticky wicket to analyze. But we're looking through each one. We do expect we'll have some extra costs, and we'll be working those through the winter to settle what we can. We've had things, for example, when we went to put in the water line over by ABI, the water service for the PCT, it filled up with, the trench filled up with water that had just enough of a little bit of legacy contamination, leftover fuel, that lives underneath that part of the port, and that we had to store all that water and then test it before we could get permission to discharge it into sanitary sewer, decide if it had to be treated. And that, of course, was it's a cost we knew we might have some. It turned out to be a lot more water than we thought. So things like that are always going to happen, unforeseen conditions, and we just have to, again, look to entitlement, and then if we feel there's entitlement, we have to negotiate the actual cost. So that's going to be a wintertime project to go through all those, although we have knocked out quite a few of them so far. The biggest one's going to be, of course, remobilization for next year. And that's why if PPM can get done with these fenders, then they don't have to mobilize big equipment next year to put in the south floating dock and take a local crane barge situation, maybe something they can get out of Homer. So that'll decrease the cost of that. So we're doing what we can. Does that answer?
Sharon, that's great. Thank you for that. Just final question on this is confirming shoreside work. we spoke a lot of the waterborne work, but the shore side will continue, or is that also wrapping up for the season at the same time?
No, we expect to get all the shoreside work done with the exception of the paving. There's just no point in paving those areas that we've opened up this late in the season. We're gonna defer that till next year, but that's not a big item. It's local companies doing the paving, and it's just gonna be a matter of keeping it graded and nice for the operations during the winter, for Matson, who comes along South Transit. But all the uplands work, we are confident will be completed. And by the way, the water line is done. It's backfilled and done, and we're getting there on that.
Perfect. Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, any other questions
Other
on
questions?
PCG?
Other questions for Sharon before she moves on? Okay, go ahead, Sharon.
Okay, so what's coming up? What's next? Well, one of the most exciting things for the folks who have been in this building is that we're very close to putting out a design build contract for the new administration building. It will be located where the sand tent is now, which is southeast of the existing wharf. And we're going to do it a design build project because we think it's the most streamlined way to get it done the quickest. And we expect to be turning dirt on that next spring. That will hit the streets. We have one thing we have to get done first, which is do a construction workforce agreement review, which we expect will result in us having to put a construction workforce agreement into the project. And we need to get that into the RFP documents. So the teams, the architect, engineer, contractor teams that are will be putting proposals together will understand, the labor requirements of the CWA agreement. It's a little more, the construction community is a little more used to that now because it's been in place for a couple of years within the municipality and the larger projects. So we don't expect it to be a big thing. It just takes time to get these committees together, do the review. So we hope to be out within a few weeks with the on the street with the RFP for the new administration building. And we would expect to turn dirt on it start next summer and probably occupy it towards the end of 2023. So that's kind of exciting. Also, there have been, what's going on with the rest of the program, we are in preliminary design and permitting. The preliminary design has the cargo dock configuration that was accepted in June by the Assembly is proceeding. We did have one little sidebar happen on that where an idea came up to maybe a way to do do the new petroleum terminal sooner and have that be a joint temporary terminal for tote. And that idea had enough merit to be analyzed, and there'll be a presentation on Friday to the mayor, the results of that analysis. And I'm really not at liberty to say what those results are in this forum because we're not quite complete with that presentation. But that'll come about on Friday. I think we have a pre-briefing. We're going over that this afternoon, just what that presentation is going to look like. So that did get analyzed and looked at. And then the permitting is just right before this meeting. I did the my final review of the permitting strategy plan, which is, to kick off getting the environmental impact statement going for the new cargo dock situation. And with that, our next step will be to proceed with starting the permitting actions. And Colby, if you're still on, we finally got the flow chart, and I'm going to probably attach that to the executive committee meeting.
Oh, good.
Tomorrow, yeah. That's what's going on going forward. The one thing we've had, and Colby, I'm glad you were able to call today. With everything that's been going on downtown, with the assembly meetings dragging on so long and taking so much energy out of everyone in City Hall, we have had a little bit of a slowdown in some of the regular business getting done in terms of stuff that it needs to process through City Hall once the assembly's approved it and so on. We're kind of waiting our turn. But maybe that's something
I'll
Colby.
be down there in about 30 minutes, so if you want to just give me a list of time-sensitive things, I'll take it back to the office today.
I appreciate that. I've been coordinating with Lauren a little bit. We talked about that offline. But yeah, and it, you know, for those, this is a whole totally separate topic, but I do have a lot of sympathy for the assembly and the mayor's administration, everyone who's had to sit in the assembly chambers night after night after night. I listened in to all 3 nights last week because I didn't know if they'd get to an item we had on the agenda or not. And I tell you, it's got to be taking the energy out of everyone involved, no matter what side of the issue you're on. So I think we'll all be grateful when that's done. So any questions on steps going forward?
Any questions from commissioners? Well, thank you for your leadership in this project, Sharon, and I hope the optimism turns into a reality on the offenders and moving forward.
Worst comes to worst, we go start lighting candles at Holy Family.
Bless you. Bless you. Anyway, Cheryl, you're up.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to put the financial report up for for review purposes. Hopefully everyone received this in their packet and had a chance to go over it in an effort to give our guests an opportunity to present the findings on the tariff this year. I'll just give a high-level overview. Everything does seem to be tracking fairly well for this year so far. This report you'll see is through August. We have our revenues, and one item that I'll point out that is of interest, probably you'll see the top line is the cruise ship head tax. So given that we had no cruise ships last year, we did not see any passengers. And this program is a state program that, divides out the cruise ship head tax to all of the towns in Alaska that receive cruise ships for maintenance and, infrastructure that supports the cruise ship industry. So given the fact that no one had that last year, the state was able to take some CARES money that they had received, and this amount, $66,755, is what the Port of Alaska received for the 2020 cruise ship head tax, which would have been for 2019. But so they run a year in arrears. But this was a payment that was made to us on behalf of the state's program to, replace some of the revenue that we would have lost given the COVID-19 situation. So that's an interesting item on here for you all. Everything else is pretty much running on track. We have an overall receipt of 74% of our revenue, being 67% through the year. So if there's anyone that has any specific questions on the revenue section, we can talk about those now. Okay, so none. We'll move on to the expenses. Our expenses are running about 63% for personnel services. That's primarily due to the vacancy factor that we had in the engineering position for approximately 3 months. So that's the lag that you'll see there. Non-labor, again, is below where we are. The non-labor items are items that will continue to come in for work that was completed through the summer and things that we're trying to get accomplished before winter time. Our legal services are just tracking along. We received probably the lowest legal bill that I have ever seen in my time here for last month was $15,000. So we all were very happy to see that come in, given that we're at 84% of our budget for this year. The remaining items, the MISA, the dividend, the debt service, and the depreciation are all items that are recorded just as items that happen on an annual and standard basis. So let's see, where are we at here? The charges from other departments, these are the IGCs. And again, these items are they originate at City Hall. So depending on where the staff is for providing these items could be why we're only at 49%. So we'll just keep an eye on that as we track through the year. Here's our little informational math problem that gives us what we've made so far this year. We add depreciation back in because we treat it as a non-cash item. So this is about how much money we project that we have made so far this year towards our fund balance. So that always changes from month to month, and as these items are updated and posted, that'll change as well. The bottom of the form shows you where we're at as far as tonnage goes. We have a great outlook for 2021. You'll see that we're ahead. This item down here is our year-over-year comparison. So where we were in 2020 is 3 million tons, and we're already at 3.2. So again, we have a good performance. We're very happy about it and very optimistic that we'll end the year under budget and over tonnage, which would be great. So with that, I can take any questions.
Any questions for Sharon? Please.
Cheryl, Paul Mailer, real quick question. I know we're trying to move on. In the expenses, as I look through this, I never really capture where maintenance and repair is. And I know obviously in running a port, that's a great expense. I don't see it captured. And could you just point that to me where I should be reading it? Thanks.
Sure, and it's so where all of the maintenance and repair items happen is all categorized in what is classified at the municipality as non-labor. So everything for the financial statement purposes rolls up into a giant category. So in non-labor, you have repair and maintenance contracts, you have operating supplies, you have tires, you have physicals for the guys, you have office supplies. So all of those tiny categories that are very detailed in their nature roll up into the non-labor. So, I mean, we can easily delineate that if you guys would like to see that. It's, like I said, we probably have about 15 categories in non-labor that all support the repair and maintenance and operations of the port.
Okay, it makes sense. I see it now. I don't know if we need to, make it a specific line item. It's just, certainly it's a big deal and it's a lot of money. You guys are always briefing on what you're doing, and I can never capture where we're having that. So it may be worth putting in, because it is such an important part of what you're doing, to show the cost of the maintenance and repairs under that. So, but
it would not be,
thank you.
Yep, I would be happy to give that a shot for next time, and I'll break it out into 3 categories, and ultimately, the 3 categories will add up to these dollar amounts. But yeah, it's very easy to do, Paul, and I'd be happy to do that.
I appreciate it, Cheryl. Thank you.
Sure thing. Yep.
Other questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you for taking the time to clarify the non-labor.
Well, yeah, I see Abe's
question.
Sure thing.
Yeah,
Abe's, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I see Abe's has his hand raised.
Mr. Chairman, I unmuted it. Cheryl answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, sure thing. Well, I'll give that a go for next time, and we can always chat about it and refine it to meet your needs. Happy to do that.
Any further questions for Cheryl? With that, we'll move on to new business, or to old business. Steve, is there any old business for us to address?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, there is no old business that needs wrapping up by the commission.
Thank you. Then we'll move into new business, and it's the annual PCT debt service rate assessment report by Paris Blessing. Steve, do you have?
Yeah, I will tee this up. Yeah, I'll tee this up and introduce Dave Blessing, who's going to do the heavy lifting. We did this for the first time last year, after being directed by the Assembly, post their approval of the current tariff, that we would come back every year and give them a report on the overall fiscal condition of the port, but more specifically, where we stand with respect to the rates put in place to cover the debt service as it applied to the petroleum and cement terminal. So we did that, for the first time last year, and Dave Blessing from Parish Blessing and Associates. So you got the boss who's going to give the presentation today on behalf of the folks who are tasked to do that. So with that, I'll stop talking and let Dave take the floor.
Well, thanks, Steve. Again, I'm Dave Blessing, one of the founding partners for Parish Blessing, and I'm filling in for Bill Wilkes, who is somewhere in rural Mexico with very spotty internet. So he asked me to fill in just in case the internet didn't work for him down there. My colleague Jeff is going to bring up the presentation. Jeff, if you could do that. Jeff, are you there? There we go. Okay, as Steve mentioned, the point of this is to see how the PCT phased-in rate increases are performing in terms of meeting the debt covenants and other requirements that were put forth in the ordinance passed by the Assembly. So the good news, Jeff, if you can move forward. The good news is, as Steve mentioned, things, and Cheryl mentioned, I'm sorry, Jeff, can you go back to the second? There you go, right there. Good news is, Jeff, one more ahead, please. There we go. As Steve and Cheryl's presentation indicated, things are looking fairly good. Just to give you a quick overview, the original financial conditions that were required are pretty much the same as what was updated. The only difference between the original conditions and the updated conditions was that the debt was segregated into senior debt, where the debt service ratio had to be 1.35 or greater, and subordinate debt, where the debt service had to be 1.5 or greater. The difference between senior and subordinate is the senior is the revenue bonds, the subordinate is the line of credit. So just as a review, that's what we're looking at. Had to have a cash operating reserve of 90 days or greater. The capital reserve had to be sufficient to meet the bond covenants, which meant that the capital reserve had to be at least 1 year of debt service. And finally, by 2029, the PCT rates had to fully cover the debt costs. Okay, move forward, Jeff. Okay, so just to summarize what was required, the originally there was an $81 million of spending or new investment that would be required, 25 million in grants and 56 million in revenue bonds. That 56 million was comprised of 42 million in, it says 2021, but it's actually 2022, and 14 million in 2023. To meet the covenants and requirements, the PCT rates had to be increased to cover debt by 20.31% in 2020 and 21, 9.9% in 2022 through 2026, and again, that's annual increases, and 5.64% in 2027 through 2029. What that translates into rates is that by 2029, the petroleum rate would go from $0.1642 per barrel to 0.5630. Cement would go from 1.67 a ton to $5.72 per ton. So Jeff, if we can move forward. So how does that, how was that updated? The update is that instead of 81 million, the cost went up by 4 million to 85. The investment required went up to 85 million. Good news is that the grant contributions went up by 12 million from 25 to 37. And therefore the revenue bonds were able to be decreased from 56 million by 8 million down to 48. And you can see the difference in the timing of the revenue bonds in the chart. So the debt service assumptions, Jeff, if you could move on. The debt service assumptions originally, there was no premium and a 4.3% fixed interest rate. In the updated debt, there was a 8% premium, but the interest rate was brought down to an average of 2%. The terms changed from 40 years originally down to 30 years. And then you see the debt coverage ratios, the 1.35 for the senior debt and the 1.15 for the subordinate. And the debt reserve stayed the same. So where are we? What's happened? Well, the rate increases are right on target. And as Cheryl's presentation showed, they are the rate increases that were approved by the Assembly are tracking well with the requirements. So we're still at the 20.31% 2020, the 20.31% in 2021, and in 2022 we'll be at the 9.94% rate increase. The next slide shows what happens to the rates for petroleum and cement. And you can see it's moving up. In 2020, the approved rate was $20.2033 per barrel for petroleum. The update's right on target. 2021 is 0.2526. The update's right on target. 2022, 0.2853. Again, the update's right on target. Cement, the same thing. It goes from, it was $2.06 or 2.0676 in 2020. And in 2022, it's targeted at 2.9015. And no change there. So given that the rates are tracking with what was approved and the conditions are being met, in the interim, we propose that the rates remain at the existing levels and the phase-in continues as approved. We're going to continue to monitor the cost, re-examine them annually as required. Some of the things that Cheryl mentioned, that the port revenues are exceeding forecasts for now. If that continues, then the rates can be adjusted, or the port can increase its equity portion. Either way, we'll continue to monitor those. So if anybody has any questions, Jeff and I are happy to try to answer them for you.
Is there any questions from the commissioners? Then I'll start with a question. With the revenue bond changed from a different timing so that one was taken early and then one is taken in 2026, will that affect the tariff and the pay rate?
Well, so far, and that's a good question. So far, it hasn't, because of the way the debt rates are structured. It's very low in the early years, like 1.07%. So we don't see any problem with it yet.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Paul Mailer. I have a quick question, if I could, please. we've been briefing for the last year, 2 years of the increased petroleum revenue by the amount of traffic coming in, the amount of petroleum coming across. As that increased revenue being captured anywhere that that we could be able to see, where we weren't planning this years ago, and the last 2, it's been significantly increased. And I was wondering if we see where that is now, what we've done with that increased revenue, and what the futures look like for forecasting out, if that's going to impact the tariff at all. Thanks.
Well, I'll let Cheryl talk about what's happened to the existing, the increased revenue so far. But in the future, the increase in revenue through the increase in rates are intended to cover the increased debt costs. So just think of it this way: if things track the way we want them to track, or way we expect them to track, then the rates are set just high enough to cover those debt costs. In the case that they are maybe higher in the future, then that's what mentioned a minute ago, that the rate increases may be able to be reduced. But Cheryl, if you could chime in about where that increase in revenue so far has shown up. I think in your financial report, it's there.
Sure. I'm happy to try and clarify what we presume has gone on. So you'll remember back when we did the tariff, the rates for the petroleum and cement were not exactly covering the debt service. It was a smoothed rate to get to 2029. Right, so you'll see the second bullet that's on the screen. Even with the updated costs, they do not become compensatory till 2029. So what we've been able to get from the increased petroleum revenue and our tariff rates that are in place is, we're getting to PCT rates being compensable at a faster time. So while we don't need to adjust the rates now, if the volume continues and the rate increases are, tracking year to year, we potentially could get to a point where in a few years, we're at a compensatory level for rates faster. So the out years is where we'll change. So I think that it's important to remember that the costs, the rates that we put in place did not cover 100% of the debt. So when the debt was sold, we had a lower rate, and there was a great buy for the revenue bonds. So the debt service in this model, we actually are paying less. So that in conjunction with the higher volume, we're getting to compensatory rates a little bit faster, not quite yet, Paul, but it's headed that way. So we don't see that with this year, but the out years, it's a stay tuned to see where we are next year. That's why this process is great. We have the ability to evaluate at every year. Now, what we're doing, you'll see we have $1.1 million is what we've paid so far for debt service. We have another $1.1 million that we're going to pay for debt service in December. So for 2021, we have a total of $2.2 million. Well, the way the bonds amortize and the payments are structured, we go up to, in some of the out years, $3.4 million, $4.1 million. So they were able to structure lower cost or lower debt payments at the beginning of the payback in an effort to allow the port to get to where they need to be with the rates. Is that clear?
It does. I think that helps, Cheryl. I appreciate it. I just, I'm looking at the presentation, and we base this all on numbers we've done historically, and we're looking at the last 2 years being a significant increase where you've been able to show the revenue. But I was hoping did anything change in our actual model for the tariff based on several good years in forecasting out to for this to continue? So just looking at where the debt was and where that increased revenue might offset a little bit, and that helps me in the answer. So thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we take live information when we get ready to do these evaluations year after year. So the uptick in the volumes for petroleum, we have seen it'll be, just a year right now. So that balances out in with the previous year's lower volume, but we have the same expectations. I mean, we have hopes that the petroleum volume, the increased petroleum volume, is going to move a long way to support the process going forward, and that the rates will, that we do have it right, that the rates are pretty much where they need to be, and we can kind of level out as we get more experience or more historical data for the revenues under our belt. So again, I think it's a year-to-year thing. We just are anxious every year to look at it, because I did an exercise this week to say, like, from the baseline tariff rates that we implemented to the petroleum, how much of a difference was that? And did that cover the debt service that we had to pay? Because that was the goal. The goal was to cover the debt service. And the answer is, in 2021, if volumes stay the same till the end of the year, yes, the PCT increases cover the debt service to the tune. I mean, we get it, I probably shouldn't say it because we're not at the end of the year, but we're within $40,000. We may have collected $40,000 more dollars for the debt service in 2021 than what the debt service actually ends up being. So it'll be interesting to get to year end. We know what the delta is between the baseline tariff rate and the debt and the PCT fully loaded rate, if you will. So we'll be able to tell at the end of the year where we ended up as far as their contribution to the debt service.
Much appreciated, Cheryl. That's great. Thank you.
Sure. Yep.
This is Brad. I don't think it's a bad idea to have reserves too, because if we do have volumes fall off, then it wouldn't be a bad idea. I don't know if you capture them as reserves or it goes towards the debt service, but I think that would be prudent for out years when we have some diminished volume.
Right. Sorry about that, Brad.
Any
volume.
Finish your thought, Cheryl. Then I just wanted
That's
to jump
right.
in.
So any excess revenues for any of the services that we provide, if it's over budget, goes to the port fund balance, which is basically our equity and savings to for future projects, and any kind of cash contributions for projects that are required.
Would it be captured then for say the design portion for the fuel vault and this, or is it just general fund?
So the port is an enterprise fund, Brad. So it lives in the port equity. But if there's port equity and the administrative policies dictate that we can use those and go to the assembly and get it appropriated for what everyone is on board with, and you would just write that in your memo that these funds are going to be supported by tariff fees that were earned on the PCT, however we would want to provide the information, is you can put that in there. And that, I guess the basic thing to know is that the port equity can be used for whatever the assembly appropriates it for.
Understood. Thank you, Cheryl, for the clear explanation there.
Other questions for Cheryl or not Bill, for our presenter? Then I had one last question or comment to follow on, Brad. Is that difference, that delta, filling in under the financial conditions of or greater?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
Yeah, when we talked about the delta of 40,000 or whatever, and with revenues possibly continuing to increase, is that filling in under the definition of financial conditions of 1.30 or greater, or 1.15 or greater? Do we have to have that money actually set aside to fill in on the or greater?
Well, the debt service ratios have to be met. Your revenue has to be such that you are going to generate enough to cover the ratios. So does it have to be a balance? Not for the debt service ratios, but for the capital reserve? there has to be, reserves sufficient to cover 1 year of the debt service. So from a cash requirement, that would be it.
Thank you. That clarifies it. Any further questions?
I
Dave
think
or-
Mr. Thompson has, Abe still has his hand raised from the last time, Abe,
Please,
or
Abe.
do you have a new question?
I'm here and I have two comments now. First comment is thank you both, Cheryl and Mr. Blessing, for the fine, succinct report. Secondly, is there an action item buried in this issue today?
Yeah, that'll be my speaking part when this part's over.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Then we'll roll it to Steve. Thank you, David, for your presentation, and Cheryl for the clarification.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dave, and thank you, Cheryl. Yeah, just a point of personal preference, and Paul and I we've talked about this before. If petroleum volumes continue the way they continue, and the rate structure that we put in place continues to meet that, our hope is that we get to a point where we're actually going to have a conversation about whether or not we can keep it all in equity and get ahead of the curve for the future, and whether or not we can, if there's a willingness to keep the rate structure in place, even if there's room to reduce them, can we gut it out and leave them where they are and build that equity fund so that in the future, when we have to do this kind of major infrastructure, either replacement or major repairs, there's dollars there to do it without having to go back to the tariff again. So ideally, if we're entering the grown-up world, that's the conversations I hope we can have down the road a piece. But on a year-to-year basis, I really appreciate the fact that that there was enough vision in the direction we got to look at this every year, because things change about that fast, and the way you have to respond will change about that fast too. And now we have a forum where we can discuss those and make those course corrections if and when they're needed. So what I wanted to ask also, Mr. Chair, is the next action. The next item on the agenda is commission actions for introduction and consideration. And while there are none there, the follow-on to this is we will now draft a letter similar to the one we did last year for the commission chair to sign out to the assembly that gives a report on this activity and makes a recommendation to them on how to proceed. So our plan is to follow that same course. We'll send the draft out to the commission for your review and editing. And once that's been satisfied, we'll prepare it for signature by the commission chair, and then we will share the signed copy when we send it to the assembly members. We'll send a signed copy to everybody and include it as a matter of the record for the commission, if that's agreeable.
Is there any comments from the commissioners that would object to that approach? Hearing none, Steve, I believe that's the approach we look forward to you and your staff completing.
Okay, Mr. Haberman has his hand raised though, Bob. We're not quite to public comment yet, but we can dive right into public comment since that's next on the agenda.
That's where I was going next, so I just wanted to clarify if you had a timeline for the letter.
Yeah, I think we can do it as soon as possible. What we submitted last year, and since the recommendation is approximately the same, or in fact it's identical, we can probably use what we sent last year as a pretty good foundation for starting. So it shouldn't take us very long at all.
Thank you. Any further comments for this subject under new business and commission actions? Then we'll open the public comments. Mr. Haberman?
Yeah, my name is Eugene Carl Haverman. Can you hear me okay? Can you
Yes.
hear me okay? Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Eugene Carl Haverman, but the fact is, just prior to me speaking, the item that you just had a reference to a letter that should be available at a public meeting and for public comment before you sign off on it. But with what's happened and what just was discussed is you have the public out of the picture, and and this kind of thing happened before. I addressed it, and there was more responsive way to handle it as what I directed. Excuse me. I want to first say this. I appreciate over the years the commission, the staff, and how you handle your meetings, and in particular during COVID time, you've got a handle on how to hold these meetings, and with the video, audio, and you do a real good job, and you take the lead in the municipality of Anchorage. You take a lead. You lead way ahead of the Anchorage Assembly, the administration, any of the commissions out there. You have been very responsible, and I thank you on that. Second thing I would like to note is this. There is a one item on the agenda for the assembly that reference to the port, and it was mentioned briefly. It was put on the agenda for the 28th, but as you know, there has been delay to get to that item because of what's transpiring on one of the items on the mask thing, and I'm not going to address the issue on mask, but that has delayed the scenario. And there's been several nights of these meetings in Anchorage at the assembly, and I have been there as you would expect from beginning to end, and listening. And I plan to be the last one to speak on the subject there when it comes time. And we are in a very serious chapter in our state, and what's happening at the Anchorage Assembly meetings with administration present and public is a situation where there is far lack of decorum, respect. When someone speaks at a microphone, there should be silence. There shouldn't be waving hands, applauding. It's not a rally. It's a public meeting. But what's happened here, in essence, has created a climate that I do deeply believe that many people who even live in Anchorage, who are concerned about the city, who would like to attend these meetings, will have decided as a result of these several days of meetings attending at the assembly, will never return to those rooms and will never even do a remote. This is a serious chapter because we have to deal with issues, and issues like what you're doing. And I applaud what you're doing with the port. And as you know, I've said this, that the focus on the port in the state in reference to the Matsu Borough, they need to stop the work on dealing with the port there and focus and put all efforts and support you in what you're doing in Anchorage. This is the Port of Alaska, correctly named. It's vital for our state, and we need the full support of everyone in the work you're doing. But at the same time, the meetings at the assembly in the last few nights are tragic, and your work is going to be more complicated because the lack of bringing people together respectfully and talking and having a conversation and listening to each other is really seriously damaged. And I thank you for the work, and keep safe out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. I see LY has their hand up for public comment.
That's Lev Yampolsky, Petrostar. So I think Steve brought up with trying to build up some kind of equity position for future repairs. I think ultimately the concern that I would want to bring up there is if the equity fund can be used for anything at the discretion of the assembly, it's not really a fund that can be used by the port. And I think it kind of ties into a broader question of if the additional revenue that is brought in by the petroleum side, how does that line up with the user pay model that we've been discussing now for the last few years in terms of that additional revenue being allocated and staying with petroleum needs, which I think are going to continue to grow as we go through the next few years and further iterations of this port.
Thank you for that point. I'll let Steve correspond with you directly on that one. As the
Yeah,
public
sure.
comment.
And as with as with anything else at the financial level too, and I know that Burt Mattingly and I have had this same conversation about how do you protect that which we have decided we're going to do in our own best interest from being used for anything else by the assembly, and all of that finds a home in the policy world of the administration, and quite frankly, we've been lucky so far. And I'll remind you that this happened when it came to getting that kind of support from previous administrations. We were successfully able to get it. The MISA formula for the port was modified by recommendation from the previous administration, so that all the additional revenue that was raised because we raised the rates to cover debt service wouldn't be viewed as revenue generated just because the business got better. That it was acknowledged that we did that to ourselves because we were taking on debt, and it needed to be preserved for the purpose for which it was raised. So the MISA formula changed, and now the port doesn't have to, we don't have to worry about our MISA payment to the municipality going up because our revenue went up for that, which is an artificial reason. So, those kinds of decisions have to be recommended to the assembly by the administration, and we're as sensitive to those concerns as you guys are, and we'll certainly, when we find ourselves in a fiscal position where that's got that kind of, it could potentially get that kind of attention, we'll raise those issues to the administration and ask them to weigh in on our behalf so that it is in fact protected from being used for anything but a port purpose. And that's about as specific an answer as I can give you now, because right now we're waxing philosophical because we don't have a case to take to them just yet. But I think we're all on the same page with respect to protecting ourselves for when we make financial decisions with our future in mind.
So, and I think that's why my recommendation may be that this is part of the recommendations that come from the Port Commission. And to your point, we're not in a situation where there's actually money that someone can claim. So it may be an easier agreement to reach in a philosophical sense versus when there's a pot of money that someone can reallocate. And again, I think that would streamline some of the challenges that you may have in terms of keeping tariffs at that level, or even potentially looking to increase them because of additional work and the fact that at some point the port that you're building now will still need to be maintained, repaired, and replaced.
Yeah. Well, let me suggest this.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me suggest this. We can, as part of this report/letter that we'll be preparing for the assembly, preparing for the commission to send to the assembly, we can add a few sentences that talk about this as a precursor to a potential future action, so that we go on record now that we're going to need that kind of support in the future if we don't want to find ourselves with the only solution to solving infrastructure problems in the future being raise the rates, raise the rates, raise the rates.
Thank you, Steve. I see Bert and Brad have comments.
Yeah, I guess twofold to address Lev's point. Yeah, I mean, what can be allocated can be reallocated, and I don't know how you preserve those kinds of funds, which we find ourselves in right now. The situation we're looking for a lot of money to restructure. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that would be prudent to put some language in there, especially if we find ourselves with some reserves. And then to Eugene's point, I was just going to say before you mentioned adding that language that we reused last year's, and then moving forward, maybe having that letter available with the parish blessing presentation, so we can maybe make some additional comments or changes at the time of the meeting, so we're not getting something that's not made public.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. I believe when we, and Cheryl can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that when we sent the letter to the assembly last year, we also included the parish blessing presentation with it as an attachment. So I
do recall Eugene's comments, and we basically were pretty much just forwarding that and saying the commission approved of the presentation as written, pretty much as in support of, I think is all we sent. But maybe next year we'll just get last year's letter in there, and then we can edit as needed.
Yeah. Let Cheryl and I take a run at this, and we will get you something in short order.
Thank you, Bert. Mattingly, please.
Yes, thank you. Hey, Steve, I wanted to mention on that letter, if you could mention the fact that, the demand at the airport for jet fuel fluctuates greatly over time. A fine, unfortunate example was a financial crisis where we saw a 35% decline year over year, and it's just recently gotten back to those levels. So, we got to plan ahead for that slush fund, for the lean years. And then I'd also make a suggestion that we break out the tariffs in two categories, one for operation funds and one for debt service funds. That way we can highlight and see where we're at as far as the debt service budget and where we're over at. And we can make the argument, if they try to take it away, that line item is specifically for debt service.
Well, we'll take thanks for that, Bert. We'll take a look at that with our friends at Parish Blessing and see. It may not be something that we would want to do in the tariff, but it is certainly something we can do in an Excel spreadsheet so that it's readily available, should we need to refer to it.
Anything else, Bert?
No, that's all.
Thank you. Then Eugene.
Yeah, Eugene Carhaven, thank you. Just in reference to the letter, you're taking a position, but the letter has not been written, and there's not even a draft for the public to see or anything like that. The proper procedure, respectfully, is that it had been presented, written up before the meeting. The public was seen, you would have seen, and public would have had a comment. But to proceed to take the step of having a letter drafted up, signed by the commission without any public meeting, is not very transparent and with all due respect. And I'm brief on that. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Hearing none, thank you for the discussion in the public comments. That's a little unusual for me to hear, but I appreciate the openness of the port director on this. Specifically, port director's closing comments.
Yeah, just a couple of things I wanted to circle back around on. One of them being that Korean Navy visit. Under the current circumstances, I didn't get a sense. We met with we met with a senior Korean naval officer from Washington D.C. who was here yesterday as part of the planning for this. I didn't get a sense that there would be opportunity for general public visits and tours of these vessels, and given the time between now and their arrival, don't see the world changing so greatly that that's something we're going to have to get prepare ourselves to deal with. But if there's opportunity for me to extend an invitation to the commission to come down here and tour. Let me. I will go ahead and do that next time we talk with the with the captain and this rep from the naval attaché from Washington D.C. I'll ask the question and see what kind of feedback we get, and I'll pass on to you if they're willing to offer or extend that kind of an invitation. More to come on that. And the other thing I wanted to do is I want to just voice the level of frustration that I feel is probably not nearly as much as Sharon has with just how the world has changed in the time between the last Port Commission meeting and this, and what the regulatory agencies have done to challenge this construction project. It's just been incredibly frustrating, and she's right. If we overlaid where the whales were last year and where the whales were this year, and when it didn't matter last year, but now it matters this year, it's going to be days worth of delay that have been caused as a consequence of that, and it's just frustrating as heck. And then throw on top of that, the supply chain challenges of getting things here, of having to do experiments at universities with different kinds of rubber to find one that an American manufacturer can make that could satisfy the requirement for a fender system. It's just been a significant amount of hoop jumping that has got us in the predicament that we're in right now. And everybody is doing their damnedest to minimize what the impacts of all of that are going to be. So we're trying real hard. I think we're still operating within what we set aside as contingency. So as long as we can keep that balanced, then we're not in a situation where this is costing us so much more than we thought it was going to cost us. That that we're gonna have to break that kind of bad news to anybody. But it would have been nice to have it over with this year. I'll let Sharon be the eternal optimist. I will prop her up in that role, but I'll be pragmatic too. And the chips will fall where they fall in the short time we have left. It's we don't the tides have to be favorable for us as well. It's one thing to have all the equipment here, but putting a fendering system on a dock, really nice low tides are helpful. But when you're stuck in the tweens, it becomes more of a challenge in spite of how prepared you are to go. So just bear with us as we walk through this, and I sure hope we get a lot of empathy from those of you that know how this business works. And I will leave it at that, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Steve, thanks for that. And when Sharon completes her report, if we could possibly get the information on the difference in the potential impacts, there's people we are very happy to talk to about federal regulations and federal oversight. Any questions for Steve? With that, Commissioner comments?
Yeah, I'm here. I got a question for Steve. This is Brad. Yeah, Steve, I thought on this one we would be introducing some potential tariff increases for general cargo to cover the design phase of PAMP. Where are we on that in the timeline we have left to submit for 2022?
Well, here, where we are on that is we just earlier this week got permission to let the contract to get started with that. So that's been a lag. To Eugene's point, the administration's been pretty distracted by some other things right now. So we finally got the permission to do that, so we can reach back out to Parish Blessing and start to put the plan in place. Where we are financially with respect to, does that mean we can't start the design process on January for the cargo docks on January the 1st? of 2022? I don't think so. I think there's enough. I think there's enough in Port Equity to get that show on the road and play catch up. Even if we build a structure for financing this that can't start on January 1st because there's just too damn much going on the Assembly's agenda between now and the end of the year, and we want to be able to give you guys a fair time to look at whatever we propose in a timely enough manner. So, short answer, Brad, is we're going to get started on that now, and as soon as we can get it in front of you, we would like to do that. I may suggest that we move up the next meeting date to other than what it would be now, which is December. If we're going every other month, maybe move it up to sometime in November, pre the Thanksgiving holiday, which means we have to be on a pretty fast track. If we can do that, then I may make that recommendation to you. If not, then we'll hold off till December, and we'll make an effective date. Should you guys agree to sometime right after the very first Assembly meeting, where this gets its public hearing and gets put in place. But I don't think the world has to come to a grinding halt in the meantime.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure we weren't, down to the last meeting and then in the similar situation where we're passing something that wasn't time for public review. And then also, are we confirmed on the, what was it, 43 million estimate for the design cost, or is that, where are we on that number?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think either Sharon or Cheryl might have the most current number on that, but we will certainly include that in whatever we send out to you guys.
Ron, did you have a question?
Oh.
Is there any other questions on the Port Director's closing comments?
I've got a quick question. What would be the effective date on any general cargo tariffs that you just spoke of?
Yeah, and there too, Alex. I think we're at a point where we might have to have a conversation and find out what makes the most sense. I'm reticent to commit to January the 1st because I don't know if we'll have a solid case to even present in time for that not to look like it's being rushed.
When you say January 1st, you mean 2022?
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions for the Port Director? With that, I'm going to ask if, unless there's something pressing, if we could step by the commissioner's comments and step into the meeting schedule to see if it's prudent to have a November meeting versus a December meeting. Any objection to that? Hearing none, then Steve mentioned the pre-Thanksgiving meeting. How is the availability of people in November? I believe the 17th is probably the date before, but even earlier in November might be helpful. Is the calendar the 10th or the 17th?
I probably won't be available, Bob. I will be traveling, visiting family back in the Midwest during that time.
Okay.
I'm assuming this is going to be another video call. Is that correct? Or too far out?
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's video.
Why don't we assume that for now? Hope would be that we can, make it a hybrid. And anybody that wants to come down here is welcome, and the rest we can help tune in.
Yeah, this is Garrett. November 10th would work for me.
Simon Lashevsky, November the 10th would work for me, and a hybrid meeting would be perfect because I will be out of state.
This is Aves. November 10th is fine with me.
This is Paul. November 10th.
Brad, either one for Brad.
As always, I have no clue, but so far so good. We'll just wait and see.
Well, I agree on November 10th for me.
Bob, Kevin Mackey here. I can do November 10th. I'm actually leaving shortly after that. So November 10th works for me.
Excellent. So shall we agree that our next meeting will be November 10th as a hybrid to discuss review of the tariff? Any objections? Okay, we'll add November 10th to our calendar. And with that, a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Brad.
Second, Aves.
Second.
We're out of here.
Aves. With that, all in favor?
Aye.
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 See you later.
Adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Good meeting,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you. Bye.